On February 28, 2023, a passenger train like this one was on its way from Athens to Thessaloniki in the north of Greece. It was filled with students returning from a holiday weekend. Some told their families that their journey had been delayed. But it was a journey that would end in disaster, in a case now being investigated by the EU's chief prosecutor. The train collided head-on at full speed with a freight train coming in the other direction.
How many tragedies do we need to realize that financial criminality is not something minor?
Emergency rescue teams were deployed to the site of the collision. The scene, near the village of Tempe, was of total devastation. Some of the train carriages were completely destroyed, with nearly 60 people dead and dozens more injured, some of them quite seriously. Almost immediately, suspicions were raised. Had negligence been a factor, or even corruption? The next morning revealed the full extent of the disaster. The first carriage, containing the onboard cafe, was completely burnt out. The Tempe train crash left a deep scar on Greece that has yet to heal. Ever onwards to justice, the victims' families demand. Among them is Maria Gonidou. She and her husband visit the site regularly to mourn their 23-year-old daughter Kelly and her boyfriend Nikita, who both died in the first carriage.
The cafe car had the most victims. All they found were charred body parts. Since then, it's been a constant struggle for us parents and relatives.
Kelly was one of 57 people who lost their lives in the crash. Others included 34-year-old Atena, Maria, aged 19, Francesca, 20, and Anastasia, 19.
What we discovered there, because we had an investigation ongoing, there were allocated some millions of euros in Greece for restoring the rail train. And they had to implement a signaling system. If the project would have been implemented in time, in the right way, this tragedy would have been avoided.
The scene of the tragedy is now a sombre place of remembrance. 2 years on from the crash, the sense of loss is still immense. Wreckage still lies among the memorials, and grief mixes with anger.
For me, as a parent, a mother, there is no justice. For me, justice would be still having my child at home. Punishment is the only word I believe in. And what I want is for those responsible to be punished, regardless of how high-ranking they are, even if they're politicians. Either way, there is no justice for this. For me, my life and my family were destroyed that night.
But who is responsible? And what came of the swift and full investigation promised by Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis and his then Transport Minister on their visit to the site? Had misappropriated funds possibly been involved? Laura Kövesi is a fiercely committed prosecutor standing at the forefront of the EU's fight against corruption.
It was my dream to become a prosecutor when I went to the law school. I was the first female general prosecutor of Romania. And yeah, what to say, a lot of friends, even members of the family, they were not very convinced that I will finish my mandate because I'm a woman, I was very young. But I did it. Took the maximum 6 years, so a lot of challenges. chamber meeting or an operational...
In 2019, Kövesi was appointed as the first head of the European Public Prosecutor's Office. She is also investigating the Tempe train disaster. Her agency is made up of prosecutors from 24 countries, working together on subsidy fraud and financial crime, something that previously hadn't been possible on the same scale. Laura Kövesi oversees the EU's most significant fraud investigations. She heads an authority with unique powers to enforce the law. As illustrated by this case in Spain, where the EPPO joined forces with the Guardia Civil to dismantle a criminal network that had made millions of euros from unpaid sales tax on imported alcohol. Law enforcement agents seized assets and a major haul of contraband.
It's about our independence, because only an independent prosecutor can do a good job. Only an independent justice can serve the rule of law. And it's important for me because coming and working for EPPO, you know, you do not get instructions for your national authorities. You don't have to implement a policy of your national government. You are fully independent to just do what you have to do.
Kövesi is no stranger to fraud. Her native country, Romania, still ranks as one of the most corrupt countries in Europe, with both business and government plagued by mafia-like structures. Part of a legacy left by 4 decades of communist rule under the dictator Nicolae Ceausescu. Here, a young prosecutor, Laura Kövesi, rose through the ranks. Her drive, determination and high-profile successes saw her become the country's youngest and first female Attorney General at the age of 33. Colleagues and observers praised her integrity and persistence. In October 2015, the collective nightclub fire disaster in Bucharest killed 27 people. A further 37 people died over the days and weeks to follow, but not from their injuries. It turned out that supplies of disinfectants in the hospitals had been diluted, leading to fatal infections among those patients. The revelations brought to light a major case of large-scale fraud in the Romanian healthcare sector. The tragedy and the related issue of rampant corruption triggered mass protests. Eventually, the government was forced to resign. This time, corruption had cost lives.
I saw how corruption affects our life daily. And probably I wanted to do something that was important for the society and for the other citizens. And I thought that through my work I can change something.
As chief prosecutor at the National Anti-Corruption Directorate, she did bring change. In the course of her tenure, she brought thousands of individuals to court, from CEOs, civil servants and other officials, to politicians, members of the cabinet and even prime ministers. Many of them went to prison. Kövesi's clampdown also earned her enemies. In 2018, she was faced with calls to be removed from office on alleged grounds of corruption and harming Romania's image. Kövesi was fired.
I was sad, I would say, and I was walking on the street, and in one moment a woman came and he said, "Oh, Miss Kövesi, congratulations." And I was so surprised. I said, "Yeah, well, I don't know if I'm a criminal, if I did something wrong." And I was surprised. And the lady looked at me and she said, "We are very proud, we support you, and congratulations for your work, And for that moment, everything that happened, the answer is yes, it was worth it. Because if you make people to believe in your work, if you change a little bit something in your country, due to your job, I think it's worth it.
Laura Kövesi applied to take charge of the newly created European Public Prosecutor's Office, but her country blocked its own candidate.
oprirea mea de a ocupa această funcție pentru care am candidat și pentru care, repet, am ieșit prima într-o procedură în care au fost scriși mai mulți procurori din Europa. Și este evident că sunt parte a unei campanii de hărțuire, de intimidare.
She was later acquitted of all charges. And in 2019, she was appointed the EU's first chief prosecutor. Her mandate and mission to build a new authority to tackle corruption and fraud involving EU funds.
This is a historic moment. To give solemn in front of the European Court of Justice is a powerful symbol, a great honor, but also a heavy responsibility.
And responsibility was a prominent issue in the Tempe train disaster. Larissa Station, on the main line between Athens and Thessaloniki, is a key hub in the Greek railway network. This outdated signal control panel is where the fateful error was made. Yorgos Zindros shows us what his colleague did wrong.
He didn't understand the control panel, but it's straightforward. I wish I could bring those children back. I have 3 myself. They're students too, and they do a lot of travelling. It could have been my kids.
Greece's railway network has been considered to have serious shortcomings for decades. The EU has allocated billions of euros to improving infrastructure funding in the country, including 14 million alone for the safety systems at Larissa Station. But little progress seems to have been made. Yorgos Zindros took over operations here after the fatal collision. He shows us the new digital control centre and explains how it tracks trains in real time, sounding the alarm if and when danger looms. This system should have been up and running 7 years ago, but was only installed after the tragic accident.
So the project has had a life of, I would say, 7 years. And in 7 years, no one saw that there were irregularities or there were different issues with the project.
The European chief prosecutor has brought charges against dozens of people in connection with the disaster, some of them for subsidy fraud. But it's not just misappropriation of EU funding that Laura Kövesi and her team investigate. They're also investigating criminal gangs who run cross-border sales tax scams. And they've dealt a series of major blows against organised crime. In Spain, the team took down a Europe-wide network that had defrauded Germany of millions of euros in tax revenue.
They are very flexible, they have access to a lot of money, they are very well structured and organized. They even have their own online markets to sell the goods. They have their crypto-monnaies, they have their own system of communication. And on top of this, the damages that are created with VAT in each year are more than 50 billion euros, year after year, for decades.
Each member state is represented by at least one prosecutor working for Kövesi's agency. Markus Peintinger is one of several from Germany. Today, he's talking to a colleague in Milan about the results of their investigations. The news from Germany is that they have some potential new suspects for the corruption watchdog to look into.
We can work on investigations with our colleagues abroad fairly easily and without major paperwork. And that's above all thanks to her and the way she set up the office from a prosecutor's perspective.
And with the European Public Prosecutor's Office now able to conduct cross-border investigations much faster, it can take on international criminal networks. Its successes have made headlines across Europe, which happened with the Huracan investigation into a massive fraud scheme involving luxury cars. We've created a simplified reenactment of the case using artificial intelligence, Any resemblance to actual persons is purely coincidental. In the early hours of June 14, 2023, heavily armed officers from a German customs tactical unit approached an apartment building in the city of Düsseldorf. Their targets were two suspects from an Italian mafia network. Simultaneously, raids were conducted in over 150 other towns and cities across Europe, primarily in Germany, but also in Belgium, Portugal and Italy. A total of 3,000 officers searched over 500 apartments and dealerships. They found millions of euros in cash hidden in fruit boxes and gym bags. They also seized a large number of luxury cars. This footage is real. A haul the size of a football field, containing cars worth between 30 and 50 million euros, many of them seized by the authorities in connection with sales tax fraud.
We are, of course, committed to returning defrauded sales tax to the taxpayers. And so far, we've already recovered tens of millions of euros for the tax authority.
Just in Bavaria?
Yes.
This kind of fraud alone could cost Germany in excess of 10 billion euros per year. The Huracan investigation exposed a sprawling criminal network, which basically works like this. Two brothers in Germany bought high-end cars from a dealer. For example, Porsche, Ferrari, Lamborghini. On paper, they appeared to be doing legitimate business. And because they resold the cars to buyers abroad, they could reclaim the sales tax paid on the cars from the tax office. This was all above board. In the case of a Lamborghini priced between 250 and 350,000 euros, the tax amounted to 60,000 euros. The dealer in Italy who bought the car then resold it, with that sizable sales tax included. Except, the Italian tax authorities saw no sign of the 60,000 euros or the dealer. Luxury cars were only a part of the scam. Expensive watches and jewellery were hidden away in the vaults of a former bank and were also seized during various raids. And this air raid shelter contained thousands of electronic devices. Frequently, the same products are resold multiple times across borders using shell companies and strawmen, with the fraudsters reclaiming the sales tax from the respective financial authority each time, a classic case of carousel fraud. Missing trader schemes, as they're officially known, are a growing issue for the European Public Prosecutor's Office. And in addition to tax fraud, there's another organised crime scam, money laundering, using the same system for illegal weapons trafficking.
We see that they are using the same infrastructures to sell the goods for the VAT, but also to sell guns. In one of our investigations, we discovered that the same infrastructure has been used to sell 85 machine guns that has been used in one of the member states in a war between gangs.
In recent years, Sweden has seen a serious escalation in turf wars between rival gangs, with retaliatory attacks and lethal shootouts.
Then you have more modern weapons. You can have like a Glock, for example.
This police officer shows us the seized guns that have injured or killed innocent bystanders.
There are a few cases that are, they mark me. One of them is collective in Romania. The second one is Tempe case. Because the trauma, the ill that the victims, the family of the victim have, cannot be solved without justice. And this is my problem. If we do not clarify everything that happens, this will not get the right answers for the family. So these are the kind of cases that you will never forget them.
In Thessaloniki, home to the majority of the young people killed in the Tempe train crash, families are still waiting for answers. Maria Kövesi is president of the Tempe Victims' Relatives Association. She's angry about what she sees as a government cover-up. She lost her 19-year-old daughter in the collision.
In the daytime, it feels like she's just away on a little trip and will come back. It's because this hurts me so much that I'm so committed to getting legal clarification, and why I try to distract myself with my work.
She's taking legal action against the government and has also gotten the European Public Prosecutor's Office involved.
It hurts that, in the country that invented democracy and justice, we have no justice, but we are still hopeful.
Maria Kövesi says it wasn't just a case of human error. Railway personnel were immediately given the blame in Greek society. She's convinced that the collision was also caused by corruption and embezzlement at the highest level. She's been repeatedly threatened for saying this, but she remains undeterred, and she's created a petition that has now garnered 1.5 million signatures. The entire country has been deeply impacted by the tragedy.
It shows that we are all united against the perpetrators of this terrible crime who are trying to get away with it. That will not happen. It must not happen.
Investigative journalist Kostas Safaropoulos has spent years exposing the manifold flaws in the Greek railway network. He says the problems on this route had been known for some time.
There were written warnings from train drivers to the Ministry of Transport. At least 3 letters were sent in the year before the accident. Other institutions raised the issue too, as did the EU.
In February 2025, massive demonstrations took place across Greece, marking the 2nd anniversary of the crash, with over 300,000 people taking to the streets. Was evidence indeed being withheld? The public's faith in politicians has suffered considerably. Just days before the tragedy, the then Transportation Minister had angrily dismissed criticisms and concerns.
Και ντρέπομαι που θέτετε θέματα ασφαλείας. Και θα ήθελα να ανακαλέσετε αμέσως. Είναι ντροπή. Όταν σας εξήγησα και το ξαναλέω ότι το γεγονός ότι αυτή τη στιγμή υπάρχουν ειδοί διασφαλίζουμε την ασφάλεια.
In one moment, there were some information about the involvement of some ministers. We don't know if those allegations were true or were not true, because everyone has the presumption of innocence, but our job as prosecutors is to investigate, to have access to evidence.
And that access was the problem here. Despite her considerable powers, Kövesi's efforts have been impeded. To investigate high-ranking politicians, she needs approval from a parliamentary committee, which is still being blocked by Kyriakos Mitsotakis and his government, even though Greece is also represented in the European Public Prosecutor's Office. The Luxembourg-based EPPO has, alongside the European Court of Justice, rapidly become a cornerstone of EU law enforcement. Just a few years after the office was established, Kövesi's achievements have taken many in the EU by surprise. In 2024 alone, the EPPO launched more than 2,600 investigations into fraud cases, with a total value of almost 25 billion euros. And an increasing number of countries are signing up, including Sweden and Poland, who joined despite initial scepticism. In May 2025, their new prosecutors were sworn in during a ceremony attended by the President of the European Court of Justice.
We are stronger together. Those who saw division, those who do not believe that we can transcend differences for a higher purpose, they are simply wrong. And we prove it every day with our work.
The EPPO currently has 24 member nations. Other countries, however, prefer to stay on the sidelines, like Denmark and Ireland, who fear their sovereignty may be compromised, while Hungary categorically refuses to participate, even though it receives some of the highest per capita subsidies in the EU. Prime Minister Viktor Orban has repeatedly come under fire from his counterparts at summit meetings in Brussels because of his divisive behaviour and his country's corruption. These three members of the European Parliament are investigating cases in EU member states. They've made several visits to Hungary and are critical of how the country handles EU funds.
They want to treat European Union as a cash machine only, having a golden card in their hands and taking money out of the European Union without any obligations. But it doesn't work like that. The European Union is a huge cash machine, but it is also the regulation of that golden card that you have at your disposal. So to be able to get money from the European Union, you need to fulfill all of the obligations.
Orban knows exactly why he doesn't support the European Public Prosecutor. Because the lawyers would find out what he's doing with his friends and relatives, what's going on in his country. And he's afraid his friends or relatives could end up in jail.
Laura Kövesi and her agency boast an extremely impressive record, but their investigations and findings are not always welcome.
I couldn't imagine that from the European level I would have the same, issue or misunderstandings when it's about some politicians, not all of them, but some of them, that they will tell me that, Ms. Kövesi, you shouldn't speak so much about these cases and you shouldn't publish the statistics. Because if people see that we have so many cases, that they will think that we are all corrupt. And all the time I reply, okay, if I don't publish the press release and I would say that we have 0 cases, this means that everything is clean and all the countries are clean. You know, this tendency that if there is a problem to not tackle it. And I couldn't imagine that this exists.
Laura Kövesi is committed to her mission. The European Union has enormous funds at its disposal and there's a high risk of misappropriation. These funds should be going back to citizens to build better hospitals, provide quality education and functioning roads. Corruption will never go away, says Kövesi, but to her, fighting it is paramount to safeguarding democracy.